I prepared a little something to kick us off. I hope you like it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Voltaire um, and Heidegger and some points of convergence, I think. And then a little bit a model that Heidegger presents in his book on metaphysics. If you have the book, it's on page 164. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and set that up. And so Heidegger's point is that being doesn't exist by itself. Being is in this kind of nothingness, and like we know, the universe now is expanding, and the space between planets and galaxies and everything, or maybe not planets but galaxies, is expanding. And before, in the metaphysics time of Voltaire, they thought of ether, that things were ether. But Voltaire rejected this notion of space as ether because he said, I can't see it and I can't detect it by measurement, so I prefer not to acknowledge that it's a metaphysical. But now in 2024, we have more empirical studies of the expansion of space and quantum physics, etc. So it's a different kind of orientation. And Heidegger's point is that we're always taking things that we don't understand from nothingness, applying understanding to it, which makes it something. And as soon as we make it something, it's not a nothing anymore. It becomes a being in relation to Dasein. Dasein is our human understanding of beings in the world. If that helps or not. Share the screen. And all right, so you should be able to see an image that says Voltaire and Heidegger's Metaphysics, and in my name, and a presentation for unthinkment.com. And Heidegger on page 164 has this model in the center there. I've redrawn it, and the arrows are the same, and most of the words are the same. I just add in thinking instead of thinking or think. So what Heidegger is doing is saying that you can't have being without nothingness. So being and nothingness are in an encounter. They're a couplet, and so it's kind of interesting to look at this boundary that he puts and relationship really of metaphysics. And metaphysics is defined as something beyond physics or beyond the physical. And both Voltaire and Heidegger are questioning this, but Heidegger is a little closer to saying that you can't have science without metaphysics, whereas Voltaire is saying, if you want to do science, get metaphysics out of the way. So one must cultivate one's own garden, and for Voltaire, love is an illusion, hope is a disease, the future is absurd. And you saw this in the kind of play he wrote called Candide. And you go all the way through it. And the last page, the last scene is about this one must cultivate one's own garden. Is after all these adventures around the world trying to find his loved one, losing his loved one, finding her again, the Baron not letting them become a couple or married, and him throwing into prison, becoming a slave, losing everything, finding everything. And in the end, when he reconnects, not to spoil the plot for you, when he reconnects with his loved one, she's kind of decrepit and worn out and growing ugly. So in the end, he says it's best to withdraw from the world and all its political intrigues, because you're just going to find illusion, disease, and absurdity, and cultivate your own garden. Have some distance from the political and the capital. He says there's three great evils: our weariness, humans have vice, and humans have wants, And he recommends we must work our field, keep distance from the world, and this is kind of the notion of horticultural quietism. Now, Heidegger, on the other hand, wants to study nothing and when you study nothing, you turn it into a being. So as soon as you start looking at nothing and studying it, blah, 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 making a concept out of it. So being is the ground of existence for human beings, but we can't know all beings, so we look at being selectively, and we can't quite take it all in. So Dasein is a type of being capable of understanding the other beings, mostly human beings. And nothing is something we encounter all the time in his metaphysics. So study nothing turns it into a being. Nothing is primarily ontologically primary to being, which I thought was a very interesting twist and might be useful to our paper. And we attune is a mood, or people say attune to nothingness by our anxiety. So of all the moods, anxiety is the one that casts its tentacles into aspects of nothingness. And as we do that, in the relevance to enthinkment, nothing becomes something when we think. For example, when I had a blood test after the doctor said you might have cancer, there was a lot of anxiety, and then I got the test results, and the test results kind of brought the whole thing home. So enthinkment has implication. Nothing becomes something when we think it. My blood test example, we think the unknowns and enfold them via questioning to redraw boundaries of nothingness and being. So nothingness and being are encountered together, and nothing is necessary condition for scientific investigation or an enthinkment project. So this is the model. I'll blow it up here for you. That's on page 164 of the book, and the model is drawn. One of the few times I've seen a model laid out in a book by Heidegger as a figure. So I kind of redid it, and as I said before, I added in thinking instead of think. So the ought, that's kind of Kantian notion of the ethical, the moral, and it stands above being, where when we think, we cast down in thinking about being, and the way we think about it can affect our way of registering being. There's a becoming, a historical becoming, and out of that becoming history, that affects our orientation to being. And being leads to kind of an appearance or a future. So these are the four constructs that Heidegger relates to being in his book on metaphysics. So let me give you an example real quick, and this will be my last slide. So if we look at Trump here, we know he just got the 34 count convictions, guilty in his attempt to change the results of the election. And when that election happened most recently with Biden becoming the winner, Trump said, well, there's a steal. They've stolen the election from me. I went to bed and I was ahead. So that's becoming. And then the appearance in his speaking to the crowd was to request an insurgency. The kind of thinking is Magaism, make America great again. And that's an infectious kind of thinking, not a scientific thinking, not a factual thinking, but a kind of thinking in the enclave of Trumpism. And the ought here is a particular kind of ethical purchase we probably don't agree with, hopefully, at least half of the United States. But it's an autocracy, an attempt to engage a fascism in that we hope won't happen. So that's sort of an example of the nature of being. So out of nothingness, Trump casts forth this history of the Stop the Steal, the appearance of the insurgency, the thinkment of the Magaism and the autocracy. But that's not all a being, and the rest of us are composing a relation out of nothing and making a being of reclaiming our democracy.
It's no longer nothing. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, this is
that's it. That's it. He says we only understand nothing by our anxiety attunement. If we start to understand nothing, we can sense there's something going on. For example, in the Trump conviction lately, and the reaction to it, and the Republican Party rallying around Trump and declaring the whole justice system to be off the rails. And now we want to try to understand that. And as soon as we start to understand it, we put the labels on it and we put the concepts on it. I put the crisis of democracy on it. I would put that on it. You know what I mean? And then so there's this struggle to engage the nothingness that's become apparent in our democracy, or what was our democracy, even if it may not still be there. That instead of engaging all that with drinking in the ways that were exemplified in the Candide, Voltaire ends with a positive message, to create your own garden, disengage from these worldly politics. Don't be obsessed with social media. He didn't have social media then, but they had what passed for the press, I guess. And now he says, hey, you grow your own garden, disengage, grow some fruit, some vegetables, some broccoli, some carrots, The reading I'm getting from Heidegger is this relationship of being and Dasein to nothingness, that nothingness is never eliminated, Being doesn't fill the whole space and then there's nothing. And you still don't know what quantum physics is. There's a lot of unknowns out there. And as Kyle was saying, people like certainty, and the uncertainty provokes an anxiety, So that's always there. The metaphysics books, which includes a lot of the concepts of being and time, is as we latch on to something in the nothingness, we're creating that configure out of the nothingness, and it becomes something, and then we imprint it, we enact it, we unfold it. He says Biden is sleepy, Biden is stinky, Biden's a crook, his son is a crook, lock up Hillary Clinton. You know what I mean? So all the things he's casting out there are reflections of his own situation, And out of the nothing, he creates this whole movement to bring down the justice system. Goes through these adventures, always telling the truth, the Baron says, "Oh, you want my daughter or something?" He said, "Oh yeah, I want to marry her. I want to." And he says, "Well, you're not of the right caste, so I'm going to flog you. I'm going to send you to prison. I'm going to make you a slave." All these things happen to him as he's telling the truth. If he just would have shut his mouth, he might have, done a lot better. But when we say it's metaphysical, we're really dealing with the nothingness of consulting. Consultants are coming in. There's many types of consultants, and some of them are coming in to build the appearance of something new, some direction of the future. Some are reclaiming what's becoming out of the past. Some are doing the ought, some kind of ethical compass that they want to install or think they've found. And then I think Heidegger's point is we need to attend to what is this thing called thinking. He's got this book on the discourse on thinking, and it's about, and he mentions thinking a lot in the metaphysics book too. I notice, what what's the kind of thinking going on in the organization, and how is this storytelling imbibing that thinking, vibrating that thinking, and you're going to try to get a restoring of a new thinking. You're rethinking by asking some difficult questions, or you're just a clod and you're taking the money to make the egotistical, narcissistic CEO feel better about all the harm they're doing. So they need no conscience, you know. So this whole game of consulting, if you look at the bigger players, you know, McKinsey, for example, they're not out to make the world a better place. That's not what they do, you know. The kind of consulting that Anton does, I wish Anton was here, the editor of Organizational Storytelling Review, you know, wants to bring a better ethical compass in place in the consulting activity. But I would say this is a minority. This is, you know, 0.01% of the consulting industry. But anyway, that's my kind of rant on consulting. So as we transition here, looking at what's becoming, what's the appearance, what's the thinking, what's the ought in relation to being, each of those four areas is provoking being in a different way. And that's what I think is interesting about the Heidegger's model on 164. So that's my presentation for unthinkment.com, and I invite your comment.